They say, the dead don't knock. That silence is the only sound you should fear in the dead of night. But every night, at exactly 3:13 a.m., 3 soft knocks echoed down the empty dormitory halls. Not loud enough to wake everyone, but loud enough to stir the deepest fears in those who listened. No one knew where the knocking came from. No one knew who or what was knocking. And no one dared to open the door. Except Sarah. She heard those knocks every single night. And what happened after she answered changed everything. Sarah was just like any other college student. Late nights, endless pages of textbooks, and a desk lamp casting a lonely circle of light in the dark dorm room. The silence was supposed to help her focus, but that silence made the knocking stand out even more. At first, she convinced herself it was nothing. Maybe some prank from a classmate, or the wind tapping against the old windows. But it wasn't random. Not at all. Every single night, without fail, 3 sharp knocks came at exactly 3:13 a.m. No more. No less. The dormitory itself was ancient, its walls whispering stories from decades past. The wooden floors creaked with every step, the fluorescent lights flickered like a warning, and shadows pooled in the corners, dark, shifting shapes that seemed to watch. Sarah's friends warned her. "You should leave that room," they said. "There's something wrong with that place." But despite their warnings, her curiosity grew stronger. What was behind that door? Who was knocking, night after night? On those long, lonely nights, you could almost feel her heart pounding louder than the clocks ticking. The desk was scattered with notes, pens poised mid-air, waiting for her to finish her last sentence. The lamp flickered slightly, and then, silence. The clock's second hand swept closer to 3:13 a.m. and then, there it was. 3 soft, deliberate knocks. Sharp. Echoing through the hallway just outside her door. It was as if time itself held its breath. The knocking wasn't just a sound. It was a presence. A warning. And Sarah, she felt something cold crawling up her spine. The air around her grew heavier, thicker, like the room was closing in. She froze, every muscle taut, waiting for what would come next. And for the first time, she wondered if ignoring the knocks was a mistake she'd never be able to undo. But then, one night, the knocking didn't stop after the usual 3. It didn't fade away into the cold silence of the hallway like it always had. No. This time, the knocking grew louder. More urgent. Like something was pounding against the door, not just knocking, but desperate to be let in. Sarah's heart was pounding so hard, it felt like it would burst through her chest. Every nerve screamed at her to run, but she couldn't move. Her legs were frozen in place, her hand trembling as it reached out, almost involuntarily, to the door. Slowly, she inched toward the peephole, the tiny round window in the center of the door. She pressed her eye close, trying to pierce the darkness beyond. For what felt like an eternity, there was nothing. Just the dim, flickering glow of a hallway light somewhere far away, and the sound of her own ragged breathing. Then, out of the darkness, a shadow moved. Just at the edge of the light. It slipped away quietly, like a ghost retreating into the night. Sarah blinked, heart racing, but when she looked again, the shadow was gone. Just emptiness. The knocking started again, soft, deliberate, 3 knocks, then a pause, then a 4th. It wasn't just knocking anymore. It was a message she didn't understand but could feel in every bone of her body. Her breath caught in her throat. The silence that followed was heavier than any sound she'd ever heard. It wrapped around her like a thick fog, suffocating and cold. For a long moment, all she could do was stand there, frozen, listening. Every shadow seemed to shift, every creak of the old building grew louder in her ears. The door before her no longer felt like a barrier, it felt like a thin veil, barely holding back whatever was waiting. Questions flooded her mind. Who was knocking? What did they want? And why was it only Sarah who could hear them? The air in the room grew colder, the lamp's light flickered wildly, casting strange shapes on the walls. Her fingers brushed the cold metal of the doorknob, icy to the touch. She wanted to pull away, but something held her there. Outside, the dorm hallway remained eerily silent. No footsteps, no voices. But the knocking, though softer now, had not stopped. It was a rhythm she would never forget. Sarah backed away from the door slowly, her heart still racing, mind racing faster. She knew, deep down, that this was no ordinary knock. It was a warning. A call. And whatever was out there, it was coming closer. Heart pounding like a war drum, Sarah's hands shook as she grabbed her phone, her only tether to the outside world. She desperately needed to hear a voice, any voice, to break the growing silence that threatened to swallow her whole. Fumbling with the screen, she tried to call her roommate, hoping she'd answer, hoping this was just a twisted joke. But as the phone rang, nothing answered back. She glanced at the line indicator. No dial tone. Dead. As if the phone line itself had been severed, cut off from any connection to the outside. A creeping dread settled in her chest. She tried again. Pressing buttons faster, harder, but the result was the same. Dead silence. A lifeless void where the voice of help should have been. Suddenly, the knocking returned. But this time, it was different. 3 knocks. Sharp. Clear. Then, a pause. And a 4th knock. Slow. Heavy. Different. It was no longer the simple pattern she'd heard every night. It was a message, one she couldn't understand, but one that sent icy fingers crawling up her spine. The air in the room grew thick, almost suffocating. The shadows deepened. The walls seemed to close in as if the dorm itself was alive, watching, waiting. Her breath caught in her throat as the knocking stopped, replaced by an eerie, barely audible whisper drifting down the hallway. "Come with me." The voice was soft but commanding. It wasn't human, no, it was colder. A voice that felt like a warning, or a trap. Sarah's mind raced. Was she imagining it? Or was something truly out there, just beyond the door? Every instinct screamed at her to run, to lock the door and never look back. But an inexplicable force held her in place. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the doorframe, knuckles white. The knocking began again, 3 quick raps, then silence. Time stretched. The dorm was quiet, except for the thundering beat of her own heart. And then, just as suddenly as it started, everything stopped. Suddenly, the door creaked open. Just a sliver, a crack barely wide enough to slip through. But that tiny opening was enough. A cold draft rushed in, an invisible breath that swept through the room like icy fingers brushing against Sarah's skin. The temperature dropped so suddenly it was like stepping into a frozen void. Sarah froze instantly, every muscle locked in place. Her heart hammered wildly inside her chest, thudding so loud she thought it might burst through her ribs. Her wide eyes fixed on the darkness beyond the crack in the door. It was thick, impenetrable, a blackness that seemed to swallow the dim light of her desk lamp whole. And then, a whisper floated through the gap. Soft. Cold. Breathless. So close it felt like the voice was right next to her ear. "Come with me." The voice wasn't like any human sound she'd heard before. Hollow and echoing, it slithered through the air like a ghost's breath. It sent a shiver crawling down her spine, a warning wrapped in an impossible command. Sarah's mind reeled. Who was out there? What did it want? Why did it feel so urgent, so final? The door creaked open a little more, the darkness beyond deepening. It wasn't just a hallway anymore, it was a black abyss, a void pulling at her like a magnet. Her breath caught in her throat. Time seemed to slow. The silence stretched, heavy and thick, pressing down like a weight on her chest. And then, just as she was about to slam the door shut, the darkness moved. It reached out, not with hands, but with cold waves that wrapped around her like a fog, swirling and pulsing. She wanted to scream, but no sound came. The blackness enveloped her, swallowing the world she knew. When her eyes opened again, Sarah was somewhere else entirely. The cold was worse here, biting into her skin, sinking into her bones. Around her, shadows danced and twisted, shapes that didn't belong to this world, fleeting glimpses of figures just beyond clear sight. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth and decay, the scent of forgotten places long buried beneath time. Then, the whisper came again, closer this time, louder. You came. Her heart thundered in her chest, breath ragged and shallow. She had crossed a threshold, a boundary between the known and the unknown. And nothing would ever be the same again. Sarah vanished that night. Just like that, without a trace. The next morning, the dorm was frantic. Doors were flung open, rooms searched, but there was no sign of her anywhere. No footprints leading out, no whispered goodbyes, no clues left behind. It was as if the darkness itself had reached in and pulled her through some invisible door. Weeks passed. The knocking didn't stop. If anything, it grew louder, echoing through the empty halls long after everyone had left. Students whispered stories in hushed tones, tales of the midnight knocks, the shadowy figure slipping away, the cold draft that chills to the bone. Some say the knocking is a warning, a ghostly signal sent from another world. Others say it's a trap, calling the next unsuspecting soul into the shadows. The sound is unmistakable. 3 knocks. Pause. Then a 4th, different, deliberate, and terrifying. If you ever find yourself alone in a quiet dorm late at night, and you hear those knocks, would you have the courage to face the door? To look through the peephole? To answer the call? Or would you run, as fast as your feet can carry you, and never look back? Because once the door opens, once the darkness reaches out, you may never come back. Thank you for spending this stormy night with us. If this brought you peace, comfort, or rest, please consider subscribing and joining our quiet little corner of the night. New calming stories and sleep sounds await you every evening. Subscribe to the channel. Like, share, sleep deeply.